Greetings War Thunderers, this is Longshot with a beginner's guide video on the climbing spiral. Now this is a manoeuvre I've heavily exploited in arcade and people keep asking me how to perform it. I did cover climbing spirals earlier in this series in the defensive manoeuvres guide, but given the sheer volume of questions about it that I keep getting, I decided to focus on this manoeuvre in detail. So I'm going to look at the two different ways of performing climbing spirals, one of which is applicable to both realistic and arcade. The other one is really probably just an arcade only manoeuvre. I'll explain the purpose of the climbing spiral and what makes it so effective, and what to do if you come under attack while you're performing the manoeuvre. So what is a climbing spiral? It's a reversal tactic, so it's something you'll use when you're under attack in order to turn the tables. If you have an energy advantage over an opponent, it can be used to bait the opponent into attacking you and stalling their plane, thus presenting themselves as an easy target where all you need to do is observe them closely, then turn to attack them when they're close to stalling. Now some of you may be thinking, this just sounds like a rope-a-dope, and indeed that's what it is. But rope-a-dopes traditionally involve climbing straight up with an attacker behind you. The attacker stalls and you hammerhead over to turn the tables. Why complicate such a simple manoeuvre by introducing a spiral climb element rather than just going straight up? I can best answer this with an illustration from a War Thunder promotional video. Okay, so there's a pair of Lavochkins flying level and straight and swooping down from above in a boom and zoom, come a couple of BF-109s. One of the LA-5s is shot down, the BF-109 that attacked it is overshot, that leaves one BF-109 on a LA-5. He lifts straight up into a vertical climb with the 109 all over his tail, hammering away at him. The LA-5 is just flying straight, hoping for the best, while the 109 proves to be a very bad shot here. 109 is also carrying a massive bomb underneath his fuselage, and then he stalls out. And I'll just pause it there. Why did he stall out first? Now, if this was actually a game of War Thunder, it would have been the Lavochkin that stalled first because the 109 started the manoeuvre with a lot of extra speed. Also, the 109 would not have, I don't think, have been carrying a bomb underneath. But I mentioned that because you would not want to be going into a rope-a-dope if you didn't have the energy advantage. I was thinking when I first saw this video that maybe the Lavochkin was trying to get the 109 to overshoot, which would have made more sense. Okay, so the 109 is stalled. What does the Lavochkin pilot do? He sees that that's happened. How exactly I don't know because it's right behind him. Deploys flaps, turns his plane around with a hammerhead, and now the tables are turned and he can shoot down the 109 before he gets away. Okay, so that's your traditional rope-a-dope. So one real danger with the straight climb is that you can be shot down while you're climbing if the other guy has more energy than you expected and gets close enough. Also, if you're playing in sim, it might be very difficult to keep a close watch on where the opponent is because they're directly behind you, and you need to be able to watch them to assess their energy state. Another problem with this tactic, which the video did not show, if you have too much speed, your climb might simply be ignored by your target. The plane you're trying to bait could instead just dive away to gain separation from you, and that's where the climbing spiral is a far better tactic. When you have all that extra energy, it gives you a way of masking your energy advantage and staying close to the enemy plane, making yourself look like an attractive target in order to keep them interested. But unlike a straight rope-a-dope, if the enemy tries to follow and attack you, they'll need not only to climb themselves, they'll have to turn, and turn tightly enough to try and get a lead angle on your plane. Hence, you're baiting the enemy into a steep, turning, climbing manoeuvre that they simply can't sustain for very long. And because they're trying so hard to shoot you down, they're more than likely to lose track of their energy state, so they won't notice how slow they're becoming until they stall their plane, and by then it is too late. So I'm going to show you two ways to perform the climbing spiral. The first one, and this is applicable to both arcade and realistic alike, it just uses the elevator. So to start with, here's a straight elevator turn. Turn the plane on its side if I can. Very twitchy arcade model, of course. Yeah, this is arcade physics I'm flying with because I want to demonstrate both manoeuvres. Okay, we've all seen that. That's the go-to turning tactic that new players employ. Just put the plane on its side and hit the up elevator and away you go. Hope for the best. Okay, so how do I turn this into a climbing spiral? Well, firstly, you want to use WEP, and that's no matter what mode you're in because you need all the power out of the engine you can get, and you want to lift the plane up first before you begin it. Okay, now the plane is focusing up and I better hit that WEP key. And now I've just got to keep tilting the plane back with the roll key as needed to keep it just on that slight upwards angle. Okay, so I don't want to let the plane roll over completely onto its side, because then it will level out. I don't want to let it get too steep in the climb either, or I'll lose all my speed. So I'm looking at that speed, I'm keeping it around 250, 260 kilometers an hour. Okay, and while I'm doing that, I can actually use the camera to look and see what's going on below without having to hit the C key. If I hit the C key, I can still do this, but I'll have snapback when I want to adjust the direction of my plane. But I don't need to use the C key because I'm using the elevator key to perform the maneuver, which means mouse aim is disabled. Why am I looking down here? Because that's where my target will be. I need to keep a very close eye on where he is, what he's doing, what his energy state is. Because if I'm not watching him, I won't know if I need to bail out of the maneuver, if I'm getting in trouble. I won't know when he's close to stalling and when I should turn to attack. And that's actually what makes this a better maneuver, or a very good maneuver for someone who's flying with a joystick in simulator battles, because it's much easier to keep an eye on your target when you're turning like that than when they're directly behind you in a straight climb. Okay, the second maneuver is a bit more complex. And this is mostly an arcade maneuver because using the rudder, which this does, in realistic will bleed your speed very quickly. And that's in realistic nearly always a bad idea. But in arcade it does not. So how do I do this? I use up elevator and rudder as well. And I'm going to use left rudder because that's habitually what I go to. Not that I can't use right, but I just like left. So away we go. Up elevator and left rudder, and I have to turn the plane on its side with the roll key to get the best roll angle. Okay, and again, you can look down. I'll just turn on smoke so we can see what the plane's doing. I'm not climbing here. All I'm doing, I better take WEP off. All I'm doing is performing a turn. That's all. Rudder and elevator, and keeping the plane tilted so that it keeps the horizontal turn going. I'll just hold the camera still so you can get a feeling of how much this increases the plane's turn speed. And this is true of most, not all, but most fighters in arcade mode. Some Americans, for the most part, have weak rudders and don't benefit from this, but pretty much every German, Russian, British, Japanese fighter will turn a lot tighter if you use rudder and elevator instead of just elevator alone. And the difference, as you can see, is significant. Okay, so how do I turn this into a climbing spiral? All I need to do is adjust the roll so the plane's a bit flatter, and also hit WEP. And having done that, you can see now the smoke is getting left behind. The plane's not rolled over quite as far, and again I have to watch my speed. If I let it drop too slow because I've gone up too sharply, I need to then level out for a bit just to recover it, and then up we can go again. I'll also get more elevation if I hit flaps. On many planes this will work, especially planes like a Focke-Wulf 190, which doesn't have a great deal of lift from its wings. On planes like Spitfires, I would definitely not suggest it because your flaps are landing flaps for most Spitfire models, and it will just stall your plane rather than give you extra lift. And as you can see, in the same way, I was looking down with the camera, and you need to because you need to be assessing the energy state of your target. What are potential pitfalls? Well, firstly, you might underestimate the energy state of your target. They might still be able to get guns on you. And the other one is you might be, again, underestimate their energy state. You think they're about to stall, so you turn over to dive at them, and you find you're in a head-on. Now, with the first one, where your opponent looks like getting guns on you at the top of your climbing spiral and you're getting low on speed yourself, you really need to act fast. Use your rudder, get your plane over, start rolling, snap roll the plane, get out of that climbing spiral, get out of their guns. And then you have the option, once you pass them, of either running away, gaining separation, and just starting again, or maybe engage them in a turn fight, or maybe try and reinitiate a brand new climbing spiral, whichever seems to be the most appropriate alternative at the time. The other is if you turn over and suddenly you find you're in a head-on with a helicoptering plane, that is a disastrous, potentially disastrous situation. You've turned it into a 50-50 encounter by being just a little bit too fast, as I show in this example. And it is human nature to want to persevere with the maneuver because you've set it up, you think I should be able to get the kill here. But yeah, you're asking to be shot down, as indeed happened to me. Far better, if this happens, for you to break off the maneuver, again go evasive, just your normal head-on evasion. Snap roll is quite good because you're diving, you won't lose a lot of speed in it, and then reset using whatever method is appropriate at the time, but not surrendering your energy advantage in a needless head-on that you've ended because you just made a miscalculation. And miscalculations happen all the time. No matter how much practice you have at this, sometimes you'll jump the gun or you'll be a little bit slow to dive and your opponent will get away. That's life, and it's just a matter of practice. And practice is also the key to mastering these maneuvers. Go into test flights, practice both of these climbing spirals until you've got them down pat, until you can do them without having to think about them, because the last thing you need during actual combat is saying, okay, now's the time to perform a climbing spiral, but hang on, how do I do it again? And your fingers are fumbling on the keyboard, and yeah, that's just asking to get yourself shot down while you're fumbling around trying to work out what to do. So go into practice battles or test flights, just get used to performing it over and over again until it's second nature. So having shown you a bad example of a rudder turn climbing spiral in arcade, I have to finish with a good one. There's a P51 climbing up very hard from underneath me. I let him get fairly close. Then I'll start the climbing spiral with the rudder turn. Just watching him, I adjust it to make sure he doesn't get too far away from me. Then I realise he's close to stalling, so I continue into the hammerhead and I get the easy kill. That is how I use it 90% of the time. And it works. In that example, I obviously had a huge energy advantage, but that wasn't the case here. I was approaching this Spitfire with quite a lot of speed, but I didn't know how much he was carrying. And we're coming for a head-on, which I quickly get out of. And then into a climbing spiral I go, because I expect that because he's been dogfighting, I'll be carrying more speed than he is. Notice I duck down there to avoid getting into his guns, and then back into the climbing spiral again. He once more tries to turn up to get guns on me, but now he's completely out of energy. I deploy flaps to tighten my turn, and I have the firing solution. So even when your energy advantage is slight, it can be an extremely effective maneuver, even against a strong turn fighter like a Spitfire. If you have any questions at all, anything I haven't covered in this video, I'd be happy to help if I can, but I really hope this answers everyone's questions about the climbing spiral, and that a lot more people master its use, because really it's so much fun using it to rope-a-dope people and getting kills that way. It's one of the most satisfying ways you can shoot down planes in War Thunder. So I wish you all the best of luck and good hunting in whatever mode you play, and until my next video, I'll be seeing you in the skies.